Whew, barely started. We got 12.5 volts at the battery while it's running. That's close enough to being correct. That is way too low. We want to see 13.5 to 14.5 volts at this battery while it's running. The entire car is going into shutdown mode. Today we have a 2007 Porsche 911 Carrera S, and the customer complaint is that the automatic transmission Tiptronic light comes on while he starts the car. This car has the infamous slow cranking. This engine right now is running. We went in to scan it just with the Autoland. First thing I saw is that our voltage while running, 12.35 volts. This is very low. This is too low. We are gonna follow the starter cable, the positive battery cable from the battery to the car. This is an automatic transmission Carrera S, right? The placement exactly is a little bit different on every one of them, but on right here, because it bolts to the side of the transmission, so right here is where the battery cable comes from the front of the car, right? So we're gonna test this output right here and see what we get. Give me a ground there, Noah. Okay, and what does that say on the screen? 12.5 volts. And then what about above, on top of that connector? Make sure that our connection, what do we have? Still 12.5 volts. We still have low voltage right here. So now we're gonna go to the back of the alternator while the car is running and test this at the back of the alternator. The starter cable kind of disappears. It goes up to the, from that junction up to the starter and to the back of the alternator. It breaks off to the back of the alternator. So we're gonna see where it's bad between here and there. Now what we're gonna do, because it's really difficult to access with a voltmeter while the car's running the back of the starter, so we're completing the circuit from the bottom, from the transmission, back to the alternator. So we know that the alternator is good because we have 13.9 volts coming out of the alternator. We know at the junction block, at the transmission, it's bad because we have 12.5 volts. The connection is bad somewhere in between the alternator, the starter, and the junction block, and it's above the junction block. If we follow this, now what I've got here is a Flir. The Flir will see heat, and if there's too much resistance in a wire, it will overheat. So that's what we're looking for, something that's hot. So if we follow the back of the starter right through this space right here, we have got now that the back of that starter cable is 240 degrees. You wonder, like, well, what is the engine creating that heat, or is the engine overheating making that? I don't know. Let's check the engine block. So here's our engine block right down there. The engine block is 170. That red hottish pipe, what's that? So that's a coolant pipe right there. That coolant right now is 193 degrees. Okay, so the engine gets, a normal operating temperature for this car is 200, 220 degrees, somewhere in there. So how do we have 230 degrees at the back of the starter? Right, 240 degrees now at the back of that starter. There's too much resistance in that cable, and it is causing electromotive force, and it's overheating that cable connection right at that starter point. The engine isn't causing that heat. Nothing else is causing that heat except for just poor resistance in the cable. We're gonna go ahead and change that, and then we'll go and retest all this and prove our theory. We've got 13.9 volts right here testing at the battery. That's awesome. All right, so we are right on the back of the starter right there. And right in the middle there, we're at about 130 degrees, which, so here's our alternator temp right here, right? That's about 160 on those hot spots, 160. We got the coolant line right over here. Nice and warm, it's 186. And then if we follow that cable back, and we go right to the back of the starter lug post, it's 130 degrees. That is 70 degrees cooler. And this is after the engine's already warmed up. That is 70 degrees cooler than what it was before. That really So thank you very much for watching, and this car is fixed and it starts perfect now.